are now to Ratt's 1988 album, the fourth full-length album in the catalog, Reach for the Sky. Reach for the Sky was released November 1st, 1988, and like Dancing Undercover before it, achieved platinum status thanks to what remained of the band's following from earlier in the decade, as well as the singles for Way Cool Jr. and I Want a Woman. The album peaked at number 17 on the Billboard 200 albums chart in 1988. Reach for the Sky was initially supposed to be Ratt's first full-length studio album to be produced by someone other than Beau Hill, which, as we've already talked about in a few of the earlier videos, the band had been pushing for since they'd been signed. This time, the recording sessions began with Mike Stone as the producer. Stone began his career as an assistant recording engineer at Abbey Road Studios in England, and while still a teenager, Stone worked on some sessions for the Beatles' 1964 album, Beatles for Sale. He continued to work his way up, and by 1973 began a stretch of working as engineer for Queen producer Roy Thomas Baker, and eventually for Queen themselves, while the band recorded each of their 6 albums from 1973 through 1977. In fact, when Roy Thomas Baker stepped away from Queen following 1975's A Night at the Opera album, Queen just went ahead and hired Stone to remain as their engineer while they self-produced their next 2 albums, A Day at the Races and News of the World, because they loved his work. Specifically, they enjoyed his expertise and already practiced hand in overdubbing and layering their harmony background vocals like the ones heard on Bohemian Rhapsody. From there, Stone went on to produce and sometimes also engineer several of the April Wine albums, and other albums like Journey's Escape and Frontiers, Asia's 1982 debut, Whitesnake's self-titled 1987 album, and others. Ratt originally intended Reach for the Sky to be produced entirely by Stone, of course. However, at some point, once the music was basically finished, substandard DAT tape, digital audio tape, recordings of Stone's production efforts prompted then Atlantic Records president Doug Morris, where have I heard that name before, to bring in Beau Hill to assist Stone and try to salvage the album. Interestingly, the band, and specifically singer Stephen Pearcy, did not like the way Stone was handling Pearcy's lead vocals. Good luck finding much information about these issues, though, as details like that rarely get explained to the public in their entirety. Either way, Beau Hill was brought in once again to get the vocals done and tidy things up a bit for the album's release. Still, Reach for the Sky marked the last Ratt album to be produced by Beau Hill. In a September 10, 2010 interview, Richie Waddell from Focus on Metal spoke with Beau Hill about working with Ratt. In that interview, Hill was asked if, after finishing Dancing Undercover, he thought he was done working with Ratt, to which he answered, yes. Dancing Undercover was a difficult record to do for a huge variety of reasons, but I thought it was over, at least with myself and the band, so that's why I didn't start Reach for the Sky. Hill also went on to say that he and drummer Bobby Blotzer were on really bad terms at the end of the Dancing Undercover sessions. He went on to explain that he'd always gotten along with Robin Crosby, but Robin Crosby was, of course, by that point, starting to have issues of his own that were making him a little weird to deal with. And that while he was getting along fine with Stephen Pearcy, Juan Croucier was another matter. When asked if Robin Crosby was the leader of the band, Hill went on to explain that, quote, "From my perspective, absolutely. Now, depending on who you talk to, there was always controversy among the Ratt members. Sometimes they liked each other, oftentimes they disliked each other, and I mean intensely, and that spilled over into the studio, and I had to be the janitor and come clean up the mess as best I could," end quote. Hill also explained that Blotzer and Pearcy were the hardest to get performances out of in the studio. Quote, "Blotzer was a hard guy to work with. Sometimes it was very unpredictable. Some days he would come in and really nail it, and some days he wouldn't. Warren was 90% always great, and Juan was too. He was a very good bass player. The biggest issues I had were with Blotzer, but we tried to get most of the issues ironed out in the pre-production, so it wasn't costing everyone a fortune in the studio while we sat around and had mindless debates about ridiculous things," end quote. In the interview at this point, Waddell asks Hill to tell him about the phone call he got from Atlantic president Doug Morris about this time. To which Hill responded, quote, "He said, 'I need a favor. I want you to do Ratt.' And I said, 'I thought Mike Stone was doing it.' Morris said he'd heard some roughs and they sounded like a Holiday Inn band. So I said, 'Okay, I will do what you want me to do.' I listened to the roughs and we talked, and I said, 'What are my rules of engagement here?' And he said, 'Do whatever the fuck you want,' end quote." Hill goes on to explain that they knew their backs were up against a wall. They tried to do something different, hoping they would get a great result, and the record company rejected it. They were given an ultimatum. Beau is going to fix the album, and if you don't want Beau to fix it, here's your walking papers and best of luck. Hill is then asked where he would rank Reach for the Sky out of the 4 records he did with Ratt. And he said, "I would rank that pretty high. I would rank it number 2. My favorite Ratt record was Invasion." And I will post a link to that interview in the description below this video in case you'd like to go and read the whole thing. That's most of it, but maybe you've got more interest. Opening acts on the City to City tour, as it was called, included Great White, Warrant, and Kicks. The record's performance, however, was only enough to keep the group on the road for roughly 7 months. As a result, What's It Gonna Be, which, as you can see, this is the original release, original hype sticker. What's It Gonna Be was supposed to be the 3rd single, but was not released as the 3rd single as had originally been planned, and was instead used 2 years later as a B-side to the single Lovin' You's a Dirty Job from the Detonator record in 1990. In the hope that listeners who bought that record would go back and give Reach for the Sky a second listen. Okay, so How about these tracks? Side one, opening track, City to City. Written by Crosby, Crucier, DeMartini, Piercy, and Beau Hill. Wow, great opener. And finally, we're back to an opener on a Ratt album that isn't about love or subways or dancing. Cool. Now, obviously, that's a very personal complaint, and one that is sort of half joking. I think those other songs were great, but lyrically, I don't think they helped the band connect with their actual core audience very well, and certainly not as well as it helped them connect with a bunch of 14-year-old girls buying Circus magazine at the time. I'm not necessarily saying that's a terrible thing, but I do think it may have cost them more than a few fans. I mean, Judas Priest may not have had a lot of 3 million selling albums throughout their career, but the fan base there is a very loyal fan base and not going anywhere. You know, until Turbo comes out and, well, has an opener that's basically a love song. Anyway, I'm not bitching, I'm just pointing it out. So, yeah, I think City to City is great. Definitely a 5-star song. Again, I think if it or something more like it had opened things up a few albums earlier, there's less of a drop off in sales from 84 to 86, honestly. And maybe I'm just imagining that, but maybe I'm not. This album marks a big change in the Ratt guitar sound. It wasn't something that was jarring or offensive in any way. The guitars still sound absolutely great. It's just a departure from that tried and true sound they had on Cellar, Invasion, and really still on Dancing Undercover to some extent. Here, we're a bit less saturated, a bit more on the clean side of the distortion. Warren DeMartini is all over this album, and it's pretty glorious, honestly. Despite my misgivings about Robin's fade from the spotlight. For someone who isn't a guitarist, it may be a little harder to spot, but this is basically a 1-guitar album from a 2-guitar band. Track 2, I Want a Woman. Written by Crosby, Crucier, Piercy, and Hill. Good song, fun song, popular song in the catalog, and a song that I really enjoyed hearing when this album came out. I think for the most part, this album is a bit of a return to the songs that stand out and show off a bit, the way not many of them had since Out of the Cellar, honestly. Yet, I can only give I Want a Woman 4 stars for some reason. I loved it in 88, loved it for several years after that, and now I just don't want to hear it anymore. There's no particular reason, I just don't. Doesn't mean that it isn't great, though. I think it is. I probably just burned myself out on it, listening to it, learning to play it, playing it again, watching the video, stuff like that. This is the lone Robin Crosby guitar solo on Reach for the Sky. and it's a nice one. I do have to wonder if anybody in the band ever tried to actually encourage Robin to keep splitting the lead work with Warren. I've never heard anyone comment about doing that, ever. I know I'm harping on it at this point, and that's not fun to listen to, but I mean, clearly the guy could still play and still serve a song really well. So why not let him have a few more of these solos? Track 3, Way Cool Jr. Written by DeMartini, Piercy, and Hill. That's 3 writing credits for Hill on 3 tracks so far. A couple of interesting details about this song. First, Warren says he took the idea for the part of the verse riff from an exercise he'd seen Frank Zappa play at some point.
Like it was over a weekend, I think a holiday weekend, and I just had this little 4-track cassette recorder, and
no
like,
Pro
like,
Tools.
like the old cassette thing that you used to have in the car. And I managed to get this whole thing plugged in, and I got a sound, I got everything together, and I had these parts. So I just spent this weekend making this demo, this arrangement, and it was really fun because I had to bounce things. I'd get so far, and I'd have to bounce everything in one track, and then 3 more, and then I did this whole thing. So I had this great time just making this demo for 3 days, and I submitted it for the album we did in 1988 called "Reach for the Sky," and the producer didn't think it fit with the rest of the material, which was cool. So it went in the drawer. But I had played it for Dweezil Zappa, and he really liked it because there's this part in there that Frank showed us. This bit is an exercise that Frank showed us. It, not with that feel, but it's. And it just sort of percolated in my mind for, I don't know, a couple of weeks or whatever, and then then skip to the 3-day weekend part. So anyway, I saw with Dweezil a few weeks later, and I was like, you gotta hear this thing I worked on. It has that part Frank shows, and he's like, that's great. And he liked it a lot. Anyway, so then skip ahead like almost probably 14 months from there. The record was pretty much, it was the hardest thing we ever did, and was just really it just had so many problems, and it got to the point where we changed producers, and Dweezil knew the producer that took over, and so it's like, and he was saying, so how's the new Ratt stuff? Because it was, and he was like, well, I don't really think they have a single on it yet. And he goes, well, is that bluesy thing that Warren wrote on it? And he said, no. And he goes, oh, get him to play you that song. I'm not sure what it's called, so then I played him that demo, and he's like, well, this is it. And then we cut that in about 3 days, and that's how that came about.
He apparently heard the exercise, tried playing it himself later on, morphed it into what you hear on the track, and then felt guilty enough still that he went back to Zappa and asked him if he'd mind Warren using it in a song. Zappa didn't object, so here we are. Second, Mike Stone apparently passed on this song altogether while in the studio with the band before Beau Hill was brought in to take over. So obviously, When Warren auditioned the song for Hill after he showed up, he loved it. And in fact, contributed the little percussive tapping at the track's beginning himself. So yeah, biggest song from the album wouldn't have been on the album if not for Beau Hill. And I think that's really all you need to know about that. Now, that said, I'm not crazy about the song, but that hardly means it isn't great and wasn't important for the band. It certainly is, and it certainly was. I thought it was really neat and unique. I just never really loved it as much as most people seem to. But still, I got to give it 4 stars. Again, these are just my own personal ratings, people, not some kind of judgment that I'm passing that anyone else has to agree with. I know a lot of people love some of the songs I'm not crazy about on albums, and believe me, I think that's great. I want more people to love this stuff more, not less, I promise. I just try to be as honest as I can with myself and then you. Seeing Warren play this song live was really fun. And I know nowhere in the song does it say anything about Way Cool Jr. being a guitar player, but for whatever reason, Warren DeMartini, duh, it always struck me as sort of another top Jimmy from the 1984 Van Halen record. Just sort of had that same feel. Track 4, Don't Bite the Hand That Feeds. Written by Robin Crosby, Juan Croucier, Stephen Pearcy, and another track for Beau Hill. Never really liked this song much. Sorry, just still don't really care for it. I'll give it 3 stars, but I'm not giving it any more than that. I look for patterns in albums and catalogs sometimes, just as a habit, really without even realizing it. And I find it interesting that track 4 on the Beau Hill Ratt albums is usually the track I find the least interesting on the entire album. In Your Direction, Give It All, Don't Bite the Hand That Feeds, seeming to be the rule, and Body Talk, definitely an exception. And I still love In Your Direction, but the other 2, not so much. Now, in fairness, I think most albums by most bands usually have one of the lamer songs in the number 4 spot. So it's not like it's really weird or anything. It's just something that kind of pokes its head up and says hello after a few albums with me. While I was listening to the album in preparation for this review, I think I realized that I don't care for Blotzer's drum sound as much on this record for some reason. And I think it's the drum intro to this song that made me realize that. It just strikes my ear as being sort of clunky sounding. Maybe that's a Mike Stone thing. I don't know. Bobby's drums never sounded that way to me on any of the earlier albums. To the contrary, in fact, when I saw Ratt on this tour, which I'll talk about a little bit more after we get through the tracks, Blotzer was definitely one of the things that most impressed me. That dude can really play. I started as a drummer, so I do have a certain appreciation for what they do, especially live. That shit ain't easy. And Blotz was a really top-notch rock drummer. Very active, very solid, very unique, full of great, tasteful choices, song after song after song. But yeah, this track just never did a thing for me. Track 5, I Want to Love You Tonight.
Trading places, is that all you do?
Written by DeMartini, Crosby, and Piercy. Same here. Don't really like it that much. It's okay. I gave it 3 stars. I do really like Piercy's vocal on this track. I just don't love the track. I do like the verses. I don't care for the chorus. By this time, it was really probably too late for Ratt to attempt to do the whole power ballad thing. Not that they necessarily were here. I mean, they didn't release it as a single even. So maybe it was just something that came to them and was good enough it made the album. But it's certainly not going to compete with the other power ballads that were around in the mid to late 80s. All right, moving on to side 2 of the album, track 6, Chain Reaction. Written by DeMartini, Crucier, and Piercy. It took a while for this song to grow on me. I'm not sure why, it just did. I think it just struck me as another double bass track on a hard rock album at the time. I still don't love it, but I do like it. I gave it 4 stars. Almost 3, but it squeaked out number 4. Spoiler, nothing on side 2 of Reach for the Sky is going to get any less than 4 stars from me. Just for clarification, of those, this is my least favorite, but I can't drop it to 3 stars either. Track 7, No Surprise. Written by Warren DeMartini and Stephen Piercy. By the same token, I almost gave this track 5 stars, but I went with 4 instead. As much as I don't really care for the guitar riff in Don't Bite the Hand That Feeds, I do love this riff. This song has so many fun and interesting parts, and I love them all. Again, for whatever reason, most of the tracks on this album just seem to jump out at me in a way the ones on Invasion and Dancing Undercover sometimes didn't. Almost the same way the ones on Cellar did. Not quite, but almost. When I hear the vocal intro to this song now, I can't help but wonder if stuff like this was one of the reasons the band wanted Mike Stone to produce. As the story goes, Warren was the one who was really pushing for Stone to come in before the problems began to surface. I mean, it's easy to see why Ratt would have preferred Stone's track record to Hill's. Hill didn't have a track record when Atlantic tapped him to come in and produce Out of the Cellar. Meanwhile, Stone's history was obviously pretty staggering to look at. I would love to know more about how all that went down, what exactly the problems were, how much fixing Hill had to do when he came back, all of that. But I don't think we ever will. It's just always going to be one of those mysterious situations we never get full clarity on. Either way, it's a real shame. because I think this was the make or break record in Ratt's shelf life, meaning the last one that could have brought them back to the front of the pack. And anytime you have to change producers halfway through the record, that ain't a good sign. Track 8, Bottom Line. Written by Crucier, Crosby, Piercy, DeMartini, and Hill. Another catchy riff, another 4-star song. Good verses, good choruses, good pre-choruses, great solo, great vocal. Sounds like a Ratt song to me. Track 9, What's It Gonna Be? Written by Juan Crucier, Robin Crosby, Warren DeMartini, Stephen Piercy, and Hill again. Okay, 5 stars for this one. I love this track. This is one of my favorite Ratt songs, actually. So, yeah, as I already talked about, when the album didn't sell too well, the tour was cut short, and the planned 3rd single, this song, was never released like it was supposed to be. Great job yet again, Atlantic. Jeez, I hate you guys. And I'm not saying this song was going to go to #1 on the charts or make the album sell another 3 million copies, but come on, at least give it a chance. It's a really catchy song and could have had a great video. Having that 3rd single would have at least shown a little brighter light on the album and the tour, I have to believe. And maybe, just maybe, even made it look like the band's stupid fucking record company actually believed in them. An album with only 2 singles back in 1988 was just pathetic. This is not a pathetic album, and this is not a pathetic band. What would have happened to Def Leppard if Pour Some Sugar on Me had never been released as a single because the record company threw in the towel when the sales for Hysteria didn't actually knock anybody over right away? And no, I'm not comparing What's It Gonna Be to Pour Some Sugar on Me, but I am comparing record labels. And one of them believed in their product and one of them didn't. And the one that didn't deserve the success that they didn't get, in my opinion. Again, I understand why Ratt signed with Atlantic. I totally do. But I wish they hadn't. Anyway, just beating a mummified horse at this point. Track 10, the album closer, What I'm After. Written by Juan Crucier and Stephen Piercy. Another 4-star track on side 2. Great, catchy tune. And that gives Reach for the Sky a total of 40 stars divided by 10 tracks, which obviously equals a 4.0 star rating for the album. And with that, I don't like this cover. I'm not sure why. I just don't. Not only does it not stand out as well on a record store shelf unless you specifically have it in mind, it doesn't really make much sense, does it? What is any of this supposed to mean exactly? Can somebody help explain that to me, please? I don't get it. I just don't. But whatever. I can't actually think of another Ratt album cover that I do like after Dancing Undercover. And again, I was never really sure about that. Here's another image they were apparently considering using for the cover of Reach for the Sky, though. I do think I like that one a little better for some reason. Now, a few things I've been wanting to talk about with Ratt that I think it might now be time to get out there. One is the tours. I saw Ratt on the Invasion tour in '85 with Bon Jovi opening, as I've said before. And then I saw them again on this City to City tour on May 28th, 1989, at the Swiss Villa Amphitheater in Lampe, Missouri. And I very much enjoyed both shows. I wasn't able to find the exact set list for that particular show in Lampe, but I did find set lists for both the show right before that one and the show right after. And the one from the show after seemed pretty close to what I remember. So I'm going to go with that. And it was City to City, Slip of the Lip, Wanted Man, The Morning After, I Want a Woman, Lay It Down, You're in Love, the drum solo, the guitar solo, Back for More, Chain Reaction, Way Cool Jr., What's It Gonna Be, Walking the Dog, and then, of course, Round and Round. Okay, so what do I remember specifically about that show? Well, a lot of things, actually. First, the openers for the show that my friends and I went to see were supposed to be Great White and Kix, which my friends and I were all really excited about. But like a day or two before the show, or maybe even that same morning, we heard something about Kix leaving the tour and some new band called Warrant taking their spot, which we were a little bummed about because none of us had ever really heard of Warrant at that point. Of course, that would soon change in a very big way, though. Funny enough, we also had a great chance to meet and talk to all of Warrant as soon as we got to the gig.
Holy shit!
And totally passed it up.
Holy shit!
We literally pulled into the parking lot. This is an outdoor amphitheater, mind you. We park, get out of the car. I think there were probably 5 of us, if I remember correctly. And we started looking around, walking toward the amphitheater, which I don't think any of us had ever seen before. And suddenly we see this big bus pulling in and watch it park, thinking, oh, I bet that's one of the bands. And then we finally see the sign up on the front of the bus that reads Warrant. Well, naturally, we had to stop and see what happened next. So the bus door opens, the band just gets off the bus and starts walking our direction, kind of. We're about halfway between my dad's Blazer that I had driven there and the amphitheater at this point, just standing in the parking lot, which was basically, I think, just a hill. And here comes Warrant just walking right in front of us, like literally 2 feet away in front of us. I honestly can't even remember if any of us had ever heard of Warrant yet at that point. I just know we all saw them walking up to us and basically just stood there and let them walk right past without getting excited or even attempting to stop them by saying something. I also remember that right after that, when we turned back toward the amphitheater, who do we see walking toward us with a beer in his hand but great white singer Jack Russell? And what a cool guy. He just walks up to us and starts talking. Hey, how are you guys doing? You excited for the show? I'm like, holy crap. How do I keep getting so lucky with these guys? I can remember us talking about the whole Kicks/Warrant switcheroo. And I remember somebody, probably me, saying to him, yeah, I don't know anything about those Warrant guys, but we really can't wait to see you play. Well, needless to say, Warrant made quite the impression on my friends and I that night. And as for Jack Russell and Great White, they sounded so good. Easily one of the best live voices in hard rock at that time or any other. I have to say, I've always thought Jack sounded better live than he did on the records. And there definitely aren't many guys I would say that about. And then it was time for Ratt. And they come out after Great White, and I remember them going right into City to City to open the show. And the music just came blaring out and sounded incredible. They were so loud. Now, one of the things about Ratt that I've been waiting to bring up was something that I remember hearing year after year after year. And that was that Ratt had quickly developed a reputation for two things in the hard rock and metal circles. One was critics not liking their lyrics, and the other was that their live shows did not come off very well sometimes. Obviously, only seeing them twice myself, I don't have a very large sample size. But for my money, I don't think that was the band or Steven at all. From the two shows that I saw, it was their sound crew. I'll never forget the band coming out first, playing the opening to City, and then Stephen Pearcy coming on stage, raising the mic to his mouth, and nothing coming out. The whole first verse of the song just didn't exist. Eventually, they got it figured out before the song was over, but it was already too late. People never stop talking about shit like that. They remember it forever. After the song, Pearcy chose not to hide his own frustration, glaring just behind it above us toward the soundboard and saying, I'll never forget it, "Get your shit together, Angelo," like stopping just short of, "You're fucking fired. I'm tired of this shit." Now, I don't know who Angelo was, but I'm glad I wasn't Angelo after that show. The rest of the night seemed to go off without a hitch, as far as we could tell. Of course, we were probably deaf after the second song. And I personally thought, except for that single audio glitch, Ratt sounded pretty fantastic. But it is apparently something that wasn't totally unique to that night, from what I gather. The other things I remember specifically about Ratt from that night, like I said, Bobby Blotzer's drumming was pretty spectacular, and Warren DeMartini totally stole that show, at least for me. He was just incredible. And if you think about that set list, Robin would have only had about 2.5 to 3.5 solos in the entire show. which was very noticeable to me. So, what's the bottom line? No pun intended. I do think Ratt were on the right track with Reach for the Sky. I really do. For me, side 2 of this album might even be better than side 2 of Dancing Undercover, which is saying something because I love side 2 of that album. These are catchy, memorable songs with cool riffs and good beats. While I do sometimes find myself confusing one song with another, the way I said I always did with Dancing Undercover an hour after listening to it, it's not nearly as bad on Reach. Unfortunately, side 1 of Reach isn't quite as strong in my opinion. But then Ratt isn't Ratt's biggest problem anymore by this point. No, by this point, Ratt's biggest problems are things like, oh, I don't know, maybe things like I think Ratt was a great band who wrote great songs and made one great album and then a handful of really good albums. But they just never quite put anything together again that could compete with albums like those, no matter how badly some of us wanted them to. And if I were to continue the little strand I started a few videos ago of comparing the Ratt catalog with the Motley Crue catalog, then Reach for the Sky should have been Ratt's Dr. Feelgood. I don't know what to say other than it wasn't. I love it, but it just wasn't. In conclusion, this definitely feels a little like the end of an era for me. Detonator would be Ratt's next release, and there was a lot going on behind the scenes there.
Yep, there it is.
Which we'll get into in the next video. Thanks for hanging out again, Hard Rockers. We're up to 445 subscribers now, which is really great. Thank you for that. Again, still working toward that goal of the magic number 500, and hopefully we'll get there soon. You guys take care, and I'll see you all again with Detonator.